This is A Geek Leader. Hey you guys, John Rowda back with episode 118 of A Geek Leader podcast. And today on the show we've got Sean Walls. And we're going to talk about what it's like to be a Chief Information Security Officer, kind of what are the roles are there. We're going to talk about Sean's leadership and some of the principles that he goes through. We're going to talk about hiring and keeping good talent. One of the things that where I'm at in the Charlotte, North Carolina area is that there's a negative unemployment rate for cybersecurity individuals. So we're going to talk about how to get involved in cybersecurity. What are some of the things that students that are asking me about it need to know, and how do you approach that topic, as well as from a hiring perspective, what are you looking for to hire good individuals, and how do you keep those individuals? Because retention is very important when it comes to leadership. That's one of the things that we all need to be striving for, no matter if we're in cybersecurity, software development, IT infrastructure, or whatever, help desk, whatever it is. We need to worry about retention and keeping good employees. So not just hiring, but also keeping them. So we talk all about that stuff, and it was a great conversation. So with all that being said, give it up for Sean Walls.
Hey, John, thanks. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you don't mind telling the audience just a little bit about kind of your career through technology and cybersecurity and how you got to where you are today, and where are you today, as well as that path, so we can get some context around the conversation.
Okay, sure. So I've been in IT / cybersecurity for the better part of more than 20 years now. And I got into it originally through IT. I was the director of IT for a small, maybe I'll say a mid-sized telephone company, long-distance provider, and telephony VAR out of the Minneapolis area back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And from there, I cut my teeth on IT, building their data center, taking them into the 21st century. They really didn't have a whole lot in place from a technology perspective. So I had the opportunity to really build out their data center, build an ISP for them. We'd actually, for the last 6 or 7 months there, I built out a consulting practice and a mini VAR business for them. So it really exposed me to not just the day-to-day operational side of IT, but also the business side of it, and how to build and develop profitable businesses for organizations. From there, I moved on to Black Box, which you and maybe your listeners would remember back in the day. They were that big, fat 1,200-page catalog, back before things talked real nice to each other, and you needed all these connectors and converters and so on. They were kind of the leader in that space, and I was brought on as a network and security consultant for them. And basically, what I would do is work with some of their larger customers, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 customers to build out data centers, to implement security controls, and it was around 2002, it might have been 2003, 2004 when Sarbanes-Oxley occurred, and that was really kind of the turning point in my career, where I was asked to step up and help, take Black Box through Sarbanes-Oxley, and I was, it was the first time that I was exposed to real governance and security frameworks and controls from an administrative and organizational perspective, so policies and processes and standards and those kinds of things. And so I had the opportunity to take a large multi-billion-dollar company through Sarbanes-Oxley for a couple of years in a row, and from there that kind of just changed the trajectory of my career. It launched me into basically doing ethical hacking and PCI and HIPAA audits when I moved on to my next company, which was MTM. That's what I ended up doing for about 4 years there. It was really just everything from social engineering attacks against organizations to penetration testing and application testing and you name it, and I was doing it. I was still also building out security controls and so on, but it was really my last position that I got exposed to the real governance side of security, and got to actually be a CISO for Presidio, which currently is a multi-billion-dollar solutions provider, and I really got to see not only the technical side, but the administrative and organizational side of leading and running an organization from a security perspective. And then fast forward to today, and I'm working for Eurofins. I'm the vice president for cybersecurity for Eurofins, which is a multi-billion-dollar organization as well. We have around 800 locations around the world, 55,000 employees, and I kind of do a few things for them, but primarily lead the cybersecurity division for that group.
Okay, so I want to take you way back because I actually also, one of my first technical jobs was also for an ISP telco provider, a long distance provider kind of thing. And isn't it surprising, sometimes kind of how far back some of that technology goes? Because for me, I was really surprised about the use of mainframes and AS400, and sometimes like we were working on some applications and the code was nearly 30 years old. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I've actually worked with a company recently, as far back as a couple of weeks ago, who is still currently using an AS400 with the homegrown code that they developed 25, 30 years ago. And the thing about it is, it still works. It's just not, they're in the process of we're helping them with the digital transformation and migrating that to the cloud and a new ERP platform and so on. But what I'm trying to say is, the technology they had years ago, it was good, but it's just, there's a lot of companies that are kind of in the stone ages when it comes to IT and security, and they're in that process of migrating to newer platforms, the cloud, and things along those lines.
Yeah, it's such a big change too, and it's really difficult for the business to say, hey, we need to keep going, we need to keep our status quo, but we also want to implement this huge thing over here, and it's a really balancing act for the CIOs and CTOs to have to go through something like that.
It is, and after all said and done, it's not the CIO or the CISO who makes those decisions. It really should be the board, and a board that has good insight into the ability of IT, technology and innovation to empower and enable the business. Those are the companies that are going to survive. Not just survive, but they're going to thrive here in the next 10 or so years. We're really at the cusp of a huge explosion in technology with big data and blockchain and IoT and artificial intelligence and all these other innovative technologies that are just really starting to come into their own and cross-pollinating. And the companies that can leverage those to give them a competitive advantage are the ones that are going to survive over the next 10 years or so. And so it's the responsibility of the CIO to make the board and the executive management teams aware of their options and how technology can be leveraged to improve, the business's competitive advantage. And it's on the CISO side, it's their job to make them aware of how do you harden, how do you manage the risk associated with these transitions and with these the adoption of these technologies.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. It needs to be from the board. And I'm on the board of directors for a credit union, and that's one of the things that I've noticed is kind of shocking for me is that most of the board members are not from a technology backgrounds and don't really understand technology that much. And I was really, obviously when I was new to the board, I've been on the board for a little over a year now, but my first couple of board meetings, I was really tentative and hesitant to speak up. But I know like when the CIO or their vice president of technology, either one of them would speak at the board meeting, they would say something and everybody's just nodding their heads and not challenging, not asking questions. And I was just kind of blown away that, wow, most board members probably don't know what's really happening in the realm of technology these days.
You're 100% correct, and I've had the opportunity to speak in front of many boards, usually representing our customer, who is usually the IT department or security department of a company, and I find that it's strangely, boards are strangely absent of someone with technical acumen and understanding, and I think they're doing themselves a disservice. And what you'll see with some of these more progressive companies is that they're starting to realize that they need somebody that not only knows IT, but also knows security, understands compliance, because compliance is becoming, a global concern. GDPR, for example, is affecting, countries everywhere around the globe. So, so the more progressive companies are adding those either advisory type roles to the board or actually having somebody sit on the board, as a member that does understand IT and how to leverage that and align that with the business to help them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So you mentioned being at a vice president of security and going through security, what intrigued you the most to get you kind of interested in cybersecurity? Was there like, you talked about ethical hacking a little bit. Was that the path you wanted to go down? Was it more defense? Was it just like, hey, that's where the jobs are right now? What was it that made you want to go that route?
Well, the jobs weren't there when I first got into the security. I mean, as a matter of fact, now they're everywhere, and we have a negative unemployment rate, which is great, and I think it's going to become even more pronounced over the next 5 years or so. But when I got into it, the jobs really weren't there. But it was an intriguing and an interesting field to get into. It really it connected with me at a level that I'd never really experienced before. It was cool. It was hip. It was constantly changing. It was dynamic. And I'm the kind of person that needs a continuous challenge. If I'm sitting in a cubicle doing the same thing day in and day out, I would just go absolutely nuts. And so this was an opportunity to step into a career that was just, it fit me like a glove. And so I did it for a number of years before it became something in its own right. As a matter of fact, I remember the day that things kind of changed, and it was back in around things were starting to change already, but around 2013, I think it was when Target got hit. That for me, especially sitting on the vendor side, and at the time I was building a cybersecurity division, a forward-facing, a customer-facing division for Presidio before I took over as their senior director of information security. And we were providing risk assessments and penetration testing and compliance services and governance services to our customers. And it was an uphill battle because nobody really wanted to spend money on security. It was that black hole that, how do you measure return on investment and these kinds of things? And so it was really just a cost center that everybody tried to avoid. And then Target hit. And I could just see a collective, gasp across the industry. The entire business world woke up and realized if it can happen to Target, it can happen to anybody. And then from there, we've seen a series. The who's who of companies and brands out there have been hit. And we're no longer measuring breaches in thousands or hundreds of thousands of records, but in hundreds of millions and sometimes billions of records. And it's impacting lives, it's impacting businesses, and people are really waking up and sort of understand that if they don't have an effective cybersecurity program and risk management program, that their business is actually in jeopardy of going out of business. We've done work for companies that have been hit and haven't survived because if you go down for several weeks and you can't serve your customers, a lot of times that's the death blow to your company.
Yeah, they move on. I remember there was a story that my CIO several years ago sent out. This is when I was working at that telco. And it was about code spaces. Do you remember code spaces? They were it's sort of like GitHub before GitHub was really a thing, where they were a repository and they let you connect with many different source control tools in the cloud, and they got hit and they got hacked, and they made the mistake of using the same administrator password across multiple systems. Someone was able to get into their cloud, and they basically deleted all their backups, deleted their cloud, asked for ransom, didn't get it, and deleted all their customers' source code. So, they were done, like out of business. It's a small company, got 45 employees, but they were completely done after that.
I remember a similar story, and I've told this on several keynote speeches that I've done. Obviously, we don't name the company, but it was a large company. They were doing close to $1 billion. They were doing about $900 or so million dollars a year in revenue, and they had the same thing where they just didn't have those what you would consider basic hygiene nowadays, like restricting administrative access, patching systems, monitoring the environment for threats and things like that. And they ended up catching a couple of engineers that were engaging in some nefarious activities and fired them. They were overseas, and they had all kinds of backdoors into the network. And that weekend, they'd come in and they just deleted everything, the heart of their data center right out. Obviously they declared an incident and started restoring stuff, and it just went back and forth because as they were restoring, these threat actors were deleting systems. They brought us in about week 3, and we helped them get back up and running. But that was 3 weeks into it, hemorrhaging about $20 million. A week is just it was too much, and they ended up declaring Chapter 11 as a result of that. So it's not just the small companies, but the larger companies as well. But I'm seeing a shift. I'm seeing more, the larger companies. I'm seeing fewer and fewer of them that don't have mature security programs. But back, you go back about 5 or 7 years ago, and you would be shocked by the number of companies, large, which you might think mature organizations that really didn't have a robust or mature security program in place.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I know of a company. They're currently like a $5 billion publicly traded company, and until Equifax got hit, they didn't have any chief security officers. They only had one person that kind of worked for they actually worked for their DevOps team that did security, and that was it.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, you can see that trend. You can see the industry maturing if you just sort of track the number of CISOs that are out there. You go back 7 years, and really it was really not even a position. Nobody was a CISO. Nobody knew a CISO. But now almost every large organization has a CISO or the equivalent, either VP of Information Security or Senior Director of Information Security. So it's definitely the awareness is growing, and I see that trend continuing over the next 5 to 10 years for sure. It's going to be a challenge, though, because finding good talent. Right now we're at a global shortage of somewhere around 1.5 million, professionals in the cybersecurity space, and that's going to grow, and the gap's going to be anywhere from, depending on what stat you look at, I suppose, from 3 to 4.5 million in the next 5 years. Yeah.
So I want to throw a question at you that I get all the time. How do I get started in cybersecurity? I get that all the time from people. I teach part-time at the local Winthrop University. It's our local college in town, and I get students that'll ask me that. How do I get started in cybersecurity? What should I be telling them? Because my answer is probably wrong.
Well, I don't know what your answer is, but I would imagine, being a smart guy, you probably gave them great advice. But I'll tell you what I did.
Sure.
I had a friend that got into IT before I did, and I'm a believer in, if you want to do something well, if you want to get into something, find somebody that's already done that or is doing it well, and kind of find out what they did and how they did it, and emulate that. And this person, he went and studied a lot of certifications, and he was more in the Microsoft data center build out area, but he had a lot of certifications, and he would jump from opportunity to opportunity as once he stopped growing at a place and couldn't contribute beyond what he felt he should be able to, he would jump to another opportunity. And so my first piece of advice would be to study. I'd say for the first 10 years for sure of my career, I was on the couch every single night with a book open. Nowadays it would be on my iPad, but I'd be reading and I'd be studying certs. I've gotten over the past 20 years, probably more than 30 certifications, because it forces me to study, to expand my knowledge, and not just cybersecurity. Nowadays, cybersecurity is a discipline in and of itself, but back when I was coming up, the greatest benefit that I had was the fact that I was exposed to a whole bunch of different technologies, everything from telephony systems to route switch to Microsoft and server build-outs and storage and you name it. And that gave me a really good overarching understanding of technology, because cybersecurity is, it affects everything. It affects everything from a technology perspective, right from telephony all the way to servers, route switch environments, but it also affects the business. So my first thing is to study, get certifications, get some of your core ones, your CISSP, and you can go for some ISACA ones like CISM and CISA. There's a new one that's called it's called the Certified Information Security Officer. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so it's a certified chief information, so it's a CISO. So it's a good cert. It gives you a good understanding not only of the technical side, but the business side and the budgeting side and all those aspects that go into a good CISO. So get certifications. And what I did when I first started was I would build these networks in my house, and I would practice on them. I'd practice building them out, configuring them, changing them, hacking them eventually. Nowadays you can rent space in these sort of dry fire data centers where you can practice your ethical hacking skills or whatever. So I would say that if you want to be, and if your goal is to become a CISO eventually, you need to have a balance between the technical side and the business side. So depending on who you ask, what makes a great CISO. So some will tell you they got to be really technical, and some will tell you they got to be really business, savvy. In my opinion, they have to be both, and they have to be balanced between the two, because a good CISO is somebody who understands the technology, understands how the threats that are out there, and how to manage technology in a way that secures the organization and minimizes risk. But on the flip side, you have to align security, just like you have to align IT. You have to align it with the business.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that understanding that business knowledge is one of the things that is lacking a lot of times. And what are some of the other qualities that you think are important to develop to become a good CISO?
Well, I think when you actually get into that role, and it comes as a shock to a lot of first-time CISOs, is that you are really about being a person who is persuasive and can develop rapport and communicate value. You're almost a salesperson in a way, because if you don't get buy-in, not just from above, the executive buy-in, board buy-in, but if you don't get buy-in from the stakeholders in the business, you're going to have an uphill battle in front of you, because in order to implement a security program, you got to think that all these policies, all these processes, all these controls that you're putting in place are affecting the business. They're affecting the business's ability to function freely. And in order to effectively put these in place and get people to follow the processes you put in place, you need to make sure you convey the value to those stakeholders. Because after all said and done, these stakeholders, the business owns the data. They own the systems. A lot of people will say that, well, no, IT owns them. No, IT is just a custodian of these systems. The real data and systems and applications owners are the various leaders in the business. And after all said and done, they will be the ones that will make that choice and decide whether to accept that risk or put that control in place. And so your job is to persuade them and help them understand the true risk and really just be a guide. So you need to have the technical aspect, you need to have the business side, but you have to be a good communicator. You have to be someone who can develop rapport with folks, and you need to have emotional intelligence. I mean, I don't know if you can teach emotional intelligence or learn emotional intelligence, or it's just innate, but the ability to kind of connect with somebody and understand those nonverbal cues and be able to really develop that rapport, it's critical to success as a CISO, in my opinion.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think for any kind of technology leadership, it's really important to have that that level of business knowledge as well as emotional, EQ or whatever people want to call it, to communicate and understand the needs of the business, how technology fits that needs, and what the risks are that need to be mitigated in order for the leader of that group moving forward.
Yep, I agree.
So when it comes to the qualities and benefits of a CISO and moving forward, how do you align security with business priorities? You mentioned that's kind of a necessary thing, and having that business acumen is good, but what parts of the business do you really need to understand as far as, is it sales, is it revenue, is it all of it, in order to align properly?
Well, I think it's kind of all of it, but it's not a great answer. So I'm gonna step back and I'm gonna tell you what I think. So when you're managing security for an organization, you need to not only preserve value by managing risk and minimizing downtime and making sure that they don't get breached, but you also need to try and create value. And so that's what real governance is about. Real governance is about putting those processes and practices in place that allow you to manage your resources, which is people, which is capital, which can be hardware, software, you name it, the third party or organizations that you work with, managing those efficiently and effectively to align with business priorities. So if you're a bank, for example, your priorities are obviously your reputation. You want to protect your reputation, protect your customer data, protect the integrity of the data. The last thing a bank needs is to not know if the transactions that are taking place are legitimate, or that the integrity has been jeopardized in some way. So if you're looking to align with the business, you need to first of all understand what that business does, what initiatives and strategies do they have in place to grow the business? So that really kind of forces you to sit down with the executive team or even with the board and understand what is their 2, 3, 4, 5-year roadmap. What initiatives do they have, and how can security help them? So, for example, if an organization is moving into a new market, say Europe, for example, it's kind of contemporary. We have GDPR. Security can help create value by speeding their time to market, by putting the controls in place and the policies and the processes in place to help them achieve and maintain GDPR compliance, so they can speed that that transition to get into that marketplace, and that, after all said and done, does translate into money. And so when you can start talking the talk, translating risk or security, I should say, into dollars and cents, that's when you start to bridge that gap between the technology side of it, the technical side of it, and the business side. And when you can go in front of a board and you can talk about, return on investment, and you might say, well, there's no return on investment when it comes to security. Well, it's not true necessarily. I mean, there is a calculation called a ROSI or ROSI, return on investment. There's ways to create value if you can help drive top line revenue or improve the brand or speed to market or, secure SDLC, for example. If you can bake security into the products that you develop, it's been proven that actually reduces cost over time in recalls and other litigation issues with respect to compromises that happen with your products, and so aligning with the business means understanding the business. What are their priorities? What are their critical assets? What are their critical initiatives? And making sure that you're securing, hardening, and empowering those initiatives through security to the best of your ability.
Well, dang, that was a good answer. That was fantastic, and I totally agree. I think once you can talk about the financial aspects, the return on investments, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I know, being on the board myself for a credit union, I noticed that the presentations that come to me are different than the presentations that I would typically give. I think the reason why is because when I want to give someone a presentation, when I'm presenting to a board, I'm trying to do it from a certain perspective. I'm trying to angle it in a certain way, and I think that's one thing that we probably need a little bit more help on when it comes from a technology lead perspective. How is it that we should gear our presentations to the board to make sense? Is it focusing on that ROI, or is it more risk based?
So it can be a combination of both. What it can't be or shouldn't be is technical. If you walk in there and start talking about CVSS scores and cross-site scripting exploits and these kinds of things, you're going to lose them and you will be shut down. What you'll find is that if a company does entertain or give floor time to the CISO or the security department, and first of all, you're going to be the least important person in that room, because everybody else is talking about how to make money. But if you're given time, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you're clear, that you're concise, that you're not technical, and that you explain kind of the situation that so some of the highlights as far as what risks, high-level risks the company's dealing with, and then what you're doing to fix that. They don't want what's called FUD, or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you just come in there and just tell them how horrible the company is and how much risk there is, you're going to be shut down almost immediately. What you need to do is you need to make them aware of the risk, and then make them aware of what you're doing to fix that risk and how that's aligning with their initiatives or with their priorities. And so my thing is keep it short, keep it sweet. If you can throw in some metrics, things that you've measured, performances that show the value of security, if you can translate that into dollars and cents, even better. But keep it clear, keep it short, keep it non-technical, and make sure there's no fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that you have a clear strategy on how you're going to fix it, because that's exactly what they're going to ask. If you walk into a board and you say the sky is falling, the next thing they're going to say is, what are you doing to fix it? And if you don't have an answer, you might not have a job.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think that's the right approach to have, and I've seen it happen both ways, where people will come in there with the fear, and then I've also seen it where they come in and everything is rosy. And I think neither one of those are accurate, and neither one of those are the way you should present it. It's somewhere in between.
I agree.
All right. So one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about, you mentioned that there was a negative unemployment rate when it comes to cybersecurity. How difficult then is it to find and keep talent? Like I'm imagining that companies are poaching each other's talent, quite regularly.
They are. And what you'll find, I mean, it's a great industry to be in from an employee perspective, because when there's a shortage, if you just look at basic economics, supply and demand, when you have a very small supply and a huge demand, it translates into higher prices, so higher salaries. So you can jump from job to job, and you can find yourself getting more money. But what I find is not everybody is motivated by money. When you start managing people, you'll realize that different things motivate different people. Some people are just entirely incentivized by money, but other people are incentivized by time off and time with their family, or the ability to work from home, or a job that challenges them. It gives them a sense of meaning and personal value. Something that a job that gives them the ability to learn and to grow and a career path moving forward. Maybe security is important. So when you find the right people, the goal is to keep those people, and that's really what it boils down to. If you can retain your talent, you've got a huge leg up on the competition, because it costs so much to get somebody on board, to get them to learn the way you do things and your culture and your processes. Every time you lose somebody, it costs tens of thousands of dollars to the company. So creating an environment, first of all, pay people appropriately. Right. A lot of times companies will not give you a raise until you say, you submit your 2 weeks notice. And that's the wrong approach. If you're not constantly rewarding people for a job well done, making sure that you're giving them raises that stay in line with the industry, then I think you're eventually going to lose people. But beyond that, give praise where praise is due. Give a career path to people. Make sure that they know that there's a future here, and they're not going to be sitting in that cubicle doing the same thing 20 years from now. And then offer some perks, especially for this next generation, these millennials. They are incentivized by a completely different set of things than say our generation, and so they like the flexible work hours, or the ability to work from home, or more time off, or the ability to travel, and those kinds of things. So think outside the box and try to create a culture, create an environment that keeps people with your company.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I had the unfortunate incident. I guess it was actually pretty fortunate when I look back on it now. When I first became a manager, I didn't know anything about people management and people leadership and working to retain people. I kind of had that arrogant approach that, well, if you're not going to do a good job, then you can just go, and not trying to fix the situation and help improve, what's making the customers or the employees leave. And I had a really high turnover, and I focused really hard on figuring out why I had that. And it all came back to, because I'm doing a bad job. And people quit their bosses typically, not necessarily their company. And that was a really big eye opener for me, and something that I had to work on a lot. But once I figured that out, I started realizing that there is an ROI to actually retaining employees. It's not just for the business, but it's also for yourself. You have to spend a lot of time looking through resumes, interviewing people that may or may not be a good fit, and bring them on board when you could have just spent a little bit of time up front, cultivating that environment that would make those people successful and happy and enjoying their job, and keep the person, versus having them leave and then having to scramble to fill the position, deal with the lack of productivity while the person's not there, and the cost for hiring.
You hit a whole bunch of nails on the head there, and the one that I want to talk on a little bit is hiring the right people. I think that's an important thing. And nowadays there's the tools out there to find the right fit, and you can do Briggs-Meyer type personality tests. You can do a whole bunch of other psychological tests to see if this person is the right fit for your organization, or do they have the right skills to be successful? Are they the kind of people that are loyal, or will they jump at the first opportunity? But the second point I want to hit on is that I think a lot of managers make the same mistake that you made and I made, frankly, when I first started managing people, because people are, for lack of a better term, they're kind of messy. I mean, when you start managing people, you've got to have tolerance, you have to have patience, you have to have humility, and you have to have empathy. You have to understand that, when you're the boss, it's your job to reach down and to try and understand and empathize with what they're going through. And if you just have this proud and arrogant attitude of, you can just move on, and if you don't like it, my way or the highway kind of thing, you're going to have exactly what you encountered there. Is you're going to have a huge turnover, and it's not their fault. It's people. You're right. People leave bad managers, not bad jobs.
Yeah, and empathy was one of the things that I really struggled with, and I still struggle with it. I have to be very intentional to put myself in the correct mindset. Like before I have one-on-ones with my team, I will spend 5 or 10 minutes prior to them coming in just thinking about what was their day like today. Okay, so and so leaves his house. He has about a 20-minute commute through probably pretty bad traffic. It's going to be miserable for him getting here. He may come in a bad attitude. He's got kids. What are his kids like? What's he struggling with at home? How is that going to reframe, get myself in his mindset coming into this, so that when he starts talking, I'm not seeing things as a defensive boss. I'm seeing things like, oh, this is why he sees it that way. Let me help him out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And being proactive and giving praise where praise is due, and encouraging people and publicly rewarding. All these things play into it.
What are some ways that leaders can give praise when someone achieves something that's above the norm?
There's all kinds of obviously tangible ways you can give bonuses. You can we've done at MTM back in the day. I won an award which was called the Top Gun Award. It was an award that they gave out. They gave out every quarter. They gave out one award, and then at the end of the year they gave out a Top Gun which was the kind of the best consultant across the nation. And I won that one year, and it was I think it was like a $4,000 or $5,000 bonus, and I got this trophy. I still have it on my mantle here, and it was probably a $20 little ornament, but it meant something because I got recognized for working hard, for going the extra mile, and so on. So sometimes that public recognition in front of their peers goes a long way. I mean, it depends on the person, but that can go a long way. Just a public acknowledgement of somebody who's gone above and beyond. I mean, the traditional give a bonus kind of thing that works too. But praise when praise is due. Encourage them in front of their peers, because people like to be stroked in front of their peers, because it strokes their ego a little bit. It makes them feel good about themselves. And so at every opportunity, don't hold back praise. Give it freely, give it in abundance. And that's what I would say.
Yeah. I started this podcast strictly for selfish reasons to help myself become a better leader and a better manager. And you just reminded me of something that I used to do a long time ago that I need to start doing again. And at my last company, I developed something on my team called the GSD Award, which is the Getting Stuff Done Award. And it was a little $10 trophy that would come with me buying coffee for that person, at some point, or in lunch for that person at some point during that week. And we would give that out every week. And it would be something that would be given out not by me, but by someone else on the team. Whoever received the last award would give the next person the Getting Stuff Done Award. And it was whoever they felt during that time period got the most work done.
I like that idea, because you know what, that takes it from you and moves it on to their peers, and they get praised by the people that they work with, which sometimes might mean just as much, if not more, than being praised by your boss.
Yeah, and plus, I don't see everything. I see what people tell me about. And sometimes people are, they help someone else out, and they don't want to come tell their boss that, hey, I helped Billy out because Billy was really struggling with this, because they don't want to make Billy look bad. But if Billy sees that, he can say, hey, this guy really helped me out with something. I don't need to know what it's about. I don't need to know that Billy's incompetent or something, I need to know that, hey, the team's working well together.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That.
Yeah, I need to bring that back. It's something that, I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because you reminded me of something that I need to do for sure. So one last thing I want to hit on real quick when it comes to, finding people, keeping people, which is always a challenge. What is something that you look at when you're interviewing someone that maybe different than what most people look at? Most people look at the job history, the resumes, but what is something else that you might look at?
To be honest with you, my interview style is probably quite different than most. I mean, I have a list of sort of points that I want to hit on, but what I normally do is I will just ask an open-ended question, and I will and sometimes it's a challenging one that I know that they're not going to be able to answer, or they're going to have a difficult time doing it, and I want to see how they respond. Are they quick on their feet? Are they honest if they don't know the answer? Are they able to pull together from their experience and historical knowledge and kind of logically deduce maybe what the answer should be or could be, and how well do they do that? How well do they think on their feet? So when I hire people, I'm looking for some of those softer skills. I think that if there's technical gaps, you can fill those through some basic training and coaching and mentorship. But there's certain skills you can't teach. You can't teach somebody how to get up in front of an audience and then own the room and do a presentation that brings the house down. You can't, you can't teach somebody to go the extra mile and teach them a strong work ethic. You can't teach them how to reason effectively. I mean, these are things that, they either have it or they don't, and that's what really makes the difference between a good employee and an exceptional employee. So it's the people that go the extra mile, that that work hard and have some of these innate abilities that you just can't teach.
No, I think that's really good. That's one of the things I look for. I always ask questions like, what are your hobbies outside of work? What are some things that, if you could do something without failing, what would that be? And try to see, how creative those answers are and how well they're verbalized, what the communication style is like. Not necessarily what the answer is. It's more about the delivery of that.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. As a matter of fact, a lot of times I'll just, like what you just said, where I'll ask, what are your most important things in life? Like, what are the top three most important things? But not just that, because a lot of people will answer the same thing. They'll answer their family or their job or whatever. And then I'll ask, if you could do anything with your time, what would you do? And if they say, I would go off hunting with my buddies, and then they said the most important thing is their family, then I think there's an inconsistency in their answer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I really like both of those together. I think that plays really well together. Well, Sean, man, I really appreciate having you on. Thanks so much. How can people connect with you and find out more about you and the things that you and your company are doing?
Well, I'm on Twitter, so Sean_Walls2000. That's my handle on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can hit me on linkedin.com/in/Sean Walls. I'm always looking to connect with smart and experienced people in the cybersecurity space. Of course, I work for Eurofins, so eurofins-cybersecurity.com would be where you'd find our website. And reach out, connect with me. I'd love to add you to my network.
Yeah, I'll link those up in the show notes as well at geekleader.com. Thanks, Sean, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate you having me.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Sean Walls, and if so, please let them know on Twitter. Let me know as well, and I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. That would be fantastic. And with that being said, I'm going to read a review that we've had on Apple Podcasts. This is a 5-star from John Ackley, and it says, "Geek shall inherit and lead. This show will help your geek inner and outer be a better leader, bringing insights and knowledge from a broad range of disciplines. John Rauda explores the topic of leadership and digs into the detail like a true geek." So thank you so much for that review, John. And anybody else that wants to leave a review, please do. I will read some of them on the show. And man, thanks so much for following and listening. The download numbers continue to increase month over month, which is fantastic. So I really appreciate it. And if you could, share it with your friends, share it with your coworker, share it with your boss. We always need more leaders in technology, and hopefully with your help, we can get better leaders. And thanks so much. Have a great weekend.